Hey, Super Mamas, it's Dr. Joy here, and you are watching Delivering Joy MDTV. Welcome to Super Mama Sunday. Y'all, it is breastfeeding month, and specifically this week is Black Breastfeeding Week. September, I'm going to be bringing you all information about breastfeeding. And for Black Breastfeeding Week, I'm kicking it off with a very special Super Mama, a friend of mine, and OBGYN, Dr. Jocelyn. Definitely don't want to miss this episode. She's going to tell us not only about her own breastfeeding journey, but her thoughts about why Black women are the least likely group of women to breastfeed. Y'all, this conversation is about to be deep. Make sure you keep watching. All right, Super Mamas, let's jump right into this conversation because I am so excited to introduce my good friend, Dr. Jocelyn Slaughter. She is a business mogul, y'all. She is running a franchise called The Healthy Woman. If you are in the Atlanta area, take out your phone right now, Google The Healthy Woman, check out Dr. Jocelyn Slaughter's page, see where her locations are, book your appointment online right now. She is absolutely fabulous. She has a wonderful business and a beautiful family. She's joined by her beautiful daughter, Raven, who right now is breastfeeding, and she's playing with Mr. Turtle. And we are so excited to have them with us today because Dr. Jocelyn is going to share with us the importance of breastfeeding and why she's breastfed all three of her beautiful daughters. Welcome, Dr. Jocelyn.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having us on to talk about this really important issue that's really near and dear to my heart.
I was thinking about this topic. I automatically thought of you because we got a chance recently to go to a conference together, and we were all laughing. We were talking about, you've been breastfeeding for the last 8 years. You've been either pregnant or breastfeeding for the last 8 years. And you sent us a screenshot, and you were like, "Good night, ladies," and you were pumping at the conference. And I remember going on a girls' trip a few years ago, and at like 2, 3 in the morning, you were getting up to pump milk for your girls. And I thought, you've been so dedicated to this breastfeeding journey. How, why is breastfeeding so important to you?
Well, yes, that is very accurate of me being pregnant and breastfeeding. And for the audience, Joy has known me forever, before I had any babies, before I was married. And she actually threw my very first baby shower for my first baby. It was called Girls Are Too Cute. I don't know if you remember that. But
I did that too. It was so much fun.
Tutus everywhere. So now we're on number 3. But breastfeeding is important to me because it's natural. It's something that we naturally know how to do. It's the reason that we have breasts. And so I'm actually about to get her on it so I can keep talking right now so y'all can see what it looked like. But, we have breasts, and that's one of the things, that's the main purpose of them. And breastfeeding, it has gotten sometimes a bad name. Sometimes it's fueled by so much controversy, unfortunately, of something that's just a natural act. I breastfed my children. I'm breastfeeding this one too. And I really encourage it for my patients, for my friends. But I don't pressure people into it because that's a whole nother conversation we could talk about, because fed is best. But we love being able to give babies breast milk, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
I think Raven loves her breast milk. Look at her with this heel stretch going on up here. She's very happy being breastfed. Mm-hmm. And I remember when your first baby was little, and I remember coming to your house for maybe a barbecue or some kind of event, and you just like sat down, and it was like, maybe, I don't know how many people was at the house, and you were like, just sat down and started breastfeeding. And, I thought it was like the most beautiful thing because it was just very natural. Like, you just sat down, everybody's eating, and you're like, oh, my baby's ready to eat. Let me feed my baby. And a lot of people don't have that level of comfort with, breastfeeding or even breastfeeding in public. But when you go to other countries, you see people just sit down on a park bench and breastfeed. I think that it's so interesting that we have sort of lost that feeling of being able to feed our babies, and to do so naturally, and to just love on our children and to bond with them.
Yes, that's funny that you talk about that, because I think when I first had the first baby, I was a little nervous about exposing my breast. What are people going to say? What are they going to do? And I remember my dad had told my sister-in-law when we had the first grandbaby, and she was trying to like cover him up. And he said, "Girl, take that thing off of him. We seen what you got. You know, you don't have anything special that anybody else doesn't have." And so, that made her feel comfortable. And that, I knew that if my dad was okay with his daughter breastfeeding in front of everybody, then I should be okay with it. And I was breastfed as a baby, both me and my brother. And so my dad, got to see that. And he was the youngest of all of his siblings, and so he got to see a lot of his nieces and nephews. And so breastfeeding, which in our family, we were from Chicago, just wasn't super taboo, as some people say. When I was down in Georgia, it was a little bit different. But I had the encouragement of my family to just do what was best for the baby, and don't worry about modesty. Don't worry about somebody being if they felt uncomfortable, they could always go to the next room. But that was, I think, my dad, and of course my mom too. My mom breastfed us, both me and my brother, and I knew we breastfed for a long time, so I knew I was going to breastfeed my children from very early on.
I really love that. I love how you had that family support, but also that you've got some generational breastfeeding going on. And I think that a lot of our, our parents, like the generation before us, I feel like maybe breastfeeding got lost in that generation. And that's where we saw a lot of formula feeding, maybe in those parents who had kids in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And they, there was this misconception that if you were breastfeeding, then you were poor, and couldn't afford formula, not really thinking about the fact that breastfeeding was the healthiest thing for children and infants. And so that was something that was really shocking to me, because, when we think about breastfeeding, and particularly about Black women breastfeeding, Black women were the original breastfeeders. We were the original breastfeeders. And that history is very long and complicated, and in some cases very dark, when you think about Black women who came to this country and who were enslaved and who were forced to breastfeed other people's children, who were wet nurses or wet nannies, so to speak. When you think about that, what thoughts do you have about that, about Black women maybe not wanting to breastfeed because they consider that history?
I think that there is so much complexity to that, starting from slavery, when women's own children were ripped out of their hands and they were forced to breastfeed somebody else's baby. I couldn't imagine having that feeling of connection to a baby and knowing that it wasn't yours. And then I think formula became really popular in the Great Depression, when women needed to go to work because in the wars, because they needed to make money, their husbands were at war, and formula was definitely freedom for women. Babies are unfortunately a lot of time consuming. Yes, Brooke, hold on. Sorry, actually, this is a lot of time consuming. And formula was freeing for women, especially in the 70s, 60s, 70s, where there was a lot of women empowerment going on. The interesting part was that, my mom, you hear your mom, my mom, when she was, she was in the 60s and the 70s, and it was, very, like, you're going to breastfeed, like, you don't have to, we got formula, you don't have to be tethered to this baby, you can go out and live your life, you can have a great time. And so it did kind of go with that whole, you can be free. And I think that as women, I think we did that, the women that were like, I want to be free, we did the whole freedom thing. And, in the end, a lot of us ended up going back to breastfeeding. My mom was kind of like a flower child, you would call it. So she was, into those earthy things. So she wanted to breastfeed us, even though pretty much most of her friends didn't. And then now as we get to the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, now we're trying to go back because we've learned the benefits of breastfeeding. And so it's become, before it was looked at you were poor if you were breastfeeding in the 70s and 80s because you couldn't afford formula. Now women who, the more money you have, the more probably likely you are to breastfeed because you have the time. You're not forced to work. If you don't want to work, you don't have to. You want to work part-time. And it's almost become a luxury to breastfeed versus those who have to go back to work and be the primary provider for their household.
That's a really thought-provoking statement that you just made because, we think about breastfeeding being a luxury for people who have the means to do so and who have the opportunity to make their own schedule and be home more and be able to have the opportunity to take more time to do that. That's very interesting. And now we're seeing more and more legislation come down from both state legislators and from federal legislators that are saying that we have to provide time and space and opportunity for women who do desire to breastfeed and who are working, who are actively involved in the job market. So I think that there is some movement to try to make breastfeeding not just a luxury for those women who do have the means to make their own work schedule or to not have to work, but we're also making it we're trying to make it so that women who do have to go back to work do have opportunity to breastfeed if they desire to. But I do completely understand what you're saying. Women who do have means and women who are more educated or affluent are definitely leaning towards breastfeeding more often and even using human milk banks because they, have the means to do so and can afford that.
Yes, absolutely. And I see it in my patients all the time, not only, I'm also like you, an OBGYN, and I have a lot of women. It's unfortunate, but I'm sometimes surprised when my Black patients say, I always ask, are you still breastfeeding? And I ask them at 6 weeks, I ask them at their annual the next year. And some people look at me crazy like, of course not. The baby's 3 months old. Of course not. And I say, no, you can breastfeed. You can continue. I've breastfed each of mine until about 3 years. And the last one was about 3.5 years. So, it's this stigma of, are you crazy? I'm not still breastfeeding. And so my Black patients, I see less and less of them breastfeeding at even 6 weeks, at even 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And a lot of it is because they're going right back to work at 6 weeks. They're going to work full time. And some of the work they have, their employers don't have a lot of places for them to breastfeed, to store milk. And even the daycares that they're at, if their child is at a daycare, sometimes reconstituting breast milk, or not reconstituting, but warming up breast milk sometimes is harder than to just create a thing of formula. So they have many areas where they're trying to come back to breastfeed. And the pumps, luckily insurances have been covering breast pumps, which is great. But if you are a time person, when I had my first baby, I had a battery operated pump, which was a little more expensive, and most insurance companies don't cover those. But I actually pumped in the car on my way. And my husband was always so mad at me because he was like, I come in this car and there's just milk all over the steering wheel and the dashboard because I didn't take it. He's like, what are you doing in here? And I said, I'm trying to pump on my 30-minute drive to work. And so, but that's a more expensive one. And then you have to, and it's also a stress to it also, we breastfeeding, especially if you're exclusively breastfeeding, it's another form of stress. And if you already, we're under more stress than some people because we don't have the family support. We don't always have grandmom living in the house with us. we're trying to get back to work, we're doing our daughter's hair, we're cooking Thanksgiving dinners, that breastfeeding and trying to eat right and drink enough water is just one more stress that is, for some people, can tip them over to a postpartum depression. And so for some people's mental health, they just cannot breastfeed. And I will tell patients, for your mental health, if you need to stop, you need to stop, because it is very stressful. And you're freezing milk and pumping. And I remember my first, when me and my husband, my baby was 6 weeks, I really wanted to go to a little vacation in Chateau Alon, and I had to pump all this milk. And I remember I had 25 ounces I had pumped. I was so excited. And my mom, was giving it to her. And while I was at Chateau Alon, I was pumping. And when I came back, she said, I'm on the last bag. And that's stress. That's a lot of stress. So if you have other stress, Black women, we're just stressed out. And sometimes breastfeeding is just one more unfortunate stress that we can't do.
I have to absolutely agree with that, because I do see a lot of moms who are just absolutely stressed out. Maybe they have other children. There might be stressors at work. They may not have enough support at home. There can be issues that are going on that don't really necessarily have to do with breastfeeding itself, but it's just like one more thing on their plate to just continue breastfeeding, continue pumping, continue freezing, refrigerating, storing, trying to get the time in at work to do it. So it definitely takes a lot of commitment, and it is a difficult job. So like you, I don't necessarily try to force people into breastfeeding, but I'm always thrilled when they say that they want to make that commitment and to stick to it. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is dose dependent, right? The more breast milk your baby gets, the better. And we know breastfeeding has been shown to reduce the number of sick child visits, so your baby doesn't get sick as much. We know that it boosts their immune system. We know that it reduces their risk of heart disease when they become an adult. That it reduces their risk of diabetes and obesity and high blood pressure when they become an adult. Like, just so many, many, many benefits to breastfeeding. So, I always encourage moms to try to find ways to make that commitment if they can. And if they do decide that they want to make that commitment, try to find ways to support that breastfeeding so that they can meet their breastfeeding goals. Now, one thing, I don't know if you see this, Dr. Jocelyn, but sometimes I worry about whether or not Black mamas are getting the support that they need within the healthcare community. Like, I think about that sometimes. And I don't know, I look at lactation consultants and, when I refer people to courses or, I just wonder sometimes if that's happening the way that it should happen, like if they're being supported as much.
I definitely think that they could have a lot more support. I definitely agree that the support for Black moms is not always there, and I feel like we need more support. If you know that there's a subset of people who are under immense stress, then they should get more support than everybody else. So I do think that there's a lot of samples of formula. We know they come to our office with the Enfamil, with the this, with the starters, with the that, because they know that creates some money, and breastfeeding is free. So, who benefits from, women breastfeeding? It's not a huge commercial benefit like formula is. But I absolutely agree that we need more support. I think that a lot of people assume we're not going to breastfeed, and that, again, that surprise nature that we have, like, oh, you're going to breastfeed, we're excited because we ask, but there might be some people who don't even ask because they're constantly hit with the no, that they sometimes forget to ask. I think that there's also kind of a weird social aspect that I don't know if you've seen with some of your patients, but I would probably say, I don't think, for some reason, I've seen probably more Black women when you talk about breastfeeding, they sometimes are like, gross. They're like, ew, gross. Or they're like, this is something that I've heard that really disturbs me, that these are for my man. And, I don't see that a lot in other people.
I've heard it before, and I'm like, what? I'm like, no, these are not just to look good in your t-shirt or hold. This is for your baby. This is to produce milk. And I think that when I really start kind of asking more questions and like, tell me more about that. Like, tell me more why you feel like that's gross. Because we also talk about that with skin to skin too. Like, I don't want the baby touching me until it's been cleaned off. And when we talk about it, and I talk to them about that cheesy, Vernic stuff on the baby skin is actually sterile and it's very healthy for the baby skin and for your skin too. Like, we really have some great conversations about that. And I think that a lot of it has to do with education. I think that if you don't know and people have told you things, as you've been growing up and you don't know, and you haven't really seen people in your family breastfeed, like you had the benefit of seeing, of hearing from your mom and your dad that breastfeeding is normal. Like there's nothing gross about feeding your baby, that you can feed your baby when you need to. Don't feel like you have to run somewhere or cover her head or do all, you don't have to do all that. You just need to do what's best for your baby. A lot of families are not like that, particularly in the South, like in the Bible Belt. Like you cannot let anybody see anything. Your genitalia are dirty. They're supposed to be hidden. No one's ever supposed to see them or touch them. Like it's very taboo. And I think that really is one of the reasons why people say, ooh, gross, is because you're taught that your sexual organs are disgusting and that they're unclean and that they're not something that people should see or touch. And so when it comes to having a baby on the breast, people will say, oh no, I don't want the baby suckling on my breast, because they see it as almost like a sexual act, which is absolutely not true. It is a normal act. It's how babies eat. It's the natural way of things. So it's not a sexual thing at all. It's kind of really odd to me that people think like that.
Yes, it is odd and disturbing that comment of that this is a sexual thing that's only to be used in that nature. And I think it's about exposure. If you go and look back at like Bible paintings that were done in biblical times, or you go to like Italy and you look at these, it's lots of women that they paint breastfeeding. They will paint women in the church, and a lot of them are breastfeeding. Back in the historical time, that was very, very normal of a woman breastfeeding because they didn't have formula. So, the invention of formula has been amazing, but it's unfortunately made something that was very natural, very, very, very taboo. And I think also sometimes women are, they don't want to breastfeed because they don't want their boobs getting saggy, and it's so many things. And women are, you're doing so much, and you're still worried about your appearance to someone else, or that I don't want to keep breastfeeding, and I'm going to get my boobs done, that I'm not going to breastfeed anymore. So, but again, your breasts were meant for this, and there's so many health benefits, not only for the baby, but there's health benefits for the mom. There's, well, as we know, OBGYNs, once you start stimulating that nipple after birth, that can help decrease bleeding, postpartum hemorrhage, and it helps even when you're breastfeeding, it can help reduce the amount of bleeding you're having. It can help assist with birth control. It is not birth control, but it can help. Exclusive breastfeeding decreases the chance of ovulation, and it decreases the risk for breast cancer. So women who have breastfed for a while, you have less ovulations, less estrogen, so it can reduce your risk. And I have a family history of breast cancer, and that's a really important reason why I wanted to breastfeed, to help reduce my risk.
Yeah, I think I read a study that said if you breastfed for 8 years, then your risk of breast cancer is almost zero. So I think you might be there. So
I'm hoping, and this, I want to see that study, because I really feel like my family, a lot of us have the BRCA gene, and so but a lot of the ones who were breastfeeding didn't get, have not had any issues with cancer. Not all of them, and other ones have reduced their risk in other ways. But breastfeeding is reducing your risk of cancer, and I'm like, and it benefits the baby. Now, one thing that I believe is a old wives' tale is that you lose weight fast. I don't know about that.
Yes.
I know I haven't experienced that part, but it does. It does have the other benefits, and the few extra pounds. I'll take them. Just to give my baby a good immune system, and it's even when I've been vaccinated from COVID, hoping these vaccines, these antibodies get to her too to help protect her.
Yeah, I think there's just so many benefits, and there are countless benefits to bonding as well, like just the maternal and infant bonding that occurs. So I think it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to have that bonding. So I'm so grateful that you took the time to talk to us about this. I just really admire the commitment that you've had to breastfeeding your babies, and just to be it. Oh, she loves those glasses. Just to be such a fantastic example to your patients, to your kids, and just
I have to show all my breastfed babies now. Put that down. Come here, Janice.
Yeah, bring out the breastfed babies. Hey, Janice, where's Brooke? Breastfed babies.
These are all my breastfed babies.
Girls.
Hello.
Hello, Brooke.
You got my glasses. Brooke, you gonna say hi? Tell her how old you are.
Hi.
I'm 6 years old.
Oh, you are 4.
You said you're 6. Oh, wow.
Go tell her how old you are.
I'm 8 years old.
Okay. All right, Janice. Oh my goodness. I remember when you were born, Janice. You're getting so big. You guys are getting so big.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
That's joy.
Wow.
Joy.
Yes. That's
Joy.
Well, Brooke is 4. I don't know why she's telling me she's 6, but she's 4.
Okay.
So we got 7 months and 8. So these are all my breastfed babies, and I was a breastfed baby too. So I'm encouraging everybody, if you want to try it, there are support groups. There's a great Facebook support group that I joined. I encourage all my Black moms to join. It's called Mocha Milk Mommies, and that has helped. Even as a doctor, it's been very helpful to join. And finding support if you don't have the support locally.
Well, that is fantastic. I'm going to definitely list that in the description box for those of you who are watching on YouTube. And thank you so much, Dr. Jocelyn. And
you are so welcome.
And Janice and Brooke, we are so happy.
Bye.
Go so she can see you. Come on, so she can see you. Bye. And congratulations to all the new mommies that are coming. And I'm giving Dr. Joy Baker so much thanks for she just brought a baby in the world about 20 minutes ago. So you're just amazing, and please continue the work that you're doing. Love you, miss you so much.
Bye, girls. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you guys next time, Super Mamas. Peace.